You ever get one of those HOA letters that just makes your blood boil? Yeah, this was one of those. I was enjoying a quiet evening on my ranch, just wrapped up some repairs on the livestock fence, when I saw that little white envelope stuffed in my gate. Thought it might be another flyer or delivery mix-up. Nope. It was a violation notice from the HOA saying my fence was out of aesthetic compliance with the neighborhood standards. Never mind that I live on a ranch, on land I own, outside the main subdivision. I stared at that letter for a good minute, trying to figure out how an HOA I wasn't technically under anymore thought they had the right to fine me for building a fence that's been there longer than most of the neighborhood homes. They slapped me with a $500 fine and said I had 30 days to restore visual harmony. I kid you not, that's the wording they used. What they didn't realize is, I do my homework, and it turns out they'd been overstepping their legal boundary lines for a while. I dug through records, zoning maps, and even talked to a county planner. And what I found? Let's just say it opened a door they never expected. That's when I decided, if they wanted to mess with my land, I'd make sure their land started working for me. You won't believe how quickly things turned when I filed a request to rezone part of their green space as Livestock Overflow. So here's the part that really got under my skin. My ranch has been in the family for generations, long before there was even talk of an HOA or those fancy cookie-cutter houses popping up next to open pasture. Years ago, when the developer bought the surrounding land, they tried to rope us into the HOA. We declined, politely but firmly. Our property was zoned agricultural, not residential, and we made sure that stayed in writing. The HOA's authority stopped at the edge of their own subdivision, or at least it was supposed to. Lately, though, they'd been getting bolder. First, it was the random letters asking me to trim my weeds like it was a front yard. Then came complaints about the scent of manure after a fresh field turn. But this fence thing, that was a whole new level. They'd even included pictures, taken from what looked like a drone. That's when I realized they weren't just annoyed. They were watching. I started talking to other landowners nearby. Turns out I wasn't the only one. A neighbor down the road said he got a notice for having a tractor parked in view of the road, even though he lives on 5 acres of unincorporated land. Another got a warning about dust levels during hay season. It felt like the HOA was trying to slowly expand its reach, quietly pushing boundaries and testing who'd push back. Well, I wasn't about to roll over. If they wanted a boundary war, they picked the wrong guy to mess with. I started digging into zoning records that weekend. It wasn't exactly light reading, but I've dealt with county paperwork before, and I knew where to look. That's when I found something interesting. The HOA's green space, the one they brag about in every flyer and open house tour, sat right along the property line. And according to the records, a chunk of that space was still tagged under agricultural zoning. Apparently, when the developer carved out the subdivision, they never formally updated the land use designation, which meant it wasn't technically protected like the rest of the neighborhood. At first, I thought it was just an oversight. But the more I looked, the more it felt like the HOA either didn't know or didn't care. They'd been using that land for events, walking trails, even a small garden setup, but legally, it could still be used for farming, livestock, or storage. That's when the idea hit me. Meanwhile, the HOA started doubling down. Another letter came, this time with more aggressive language and a threat to take further action if I didn't comply with their fence request. They even left a printed-out section of their bylaws, highlighted in bright yellow, on my gate. Never mind that their bylaws had no jurisdiction over my land. It felt like they were hoping I'd fold under pressure, like maybe I wouldn't know better. But what they didn't realize is, I don't intimidate easy if they wanted to play games. I was ready to play. I just had a different set of rules. Once I had the zoning maps printed and the land records in order, I reached out to the county office to start the rezoning process. I wasn't doing anything shady. I was just using the system the same way they were trying to use it against me. The application I filed officially proposed that the unclaimed portion of their green space be reclassified as Livestock Overflow for adjacent ranch properties. It was 100% legal. What made it even better? I wasn't the only one signing on to it. A couple of other ranchers who'd been harassed by the HOA agreed to back the request. The county clerk didn't even flinch, just stamped it pending review, and told me the board would meet in 3 weeks. Meanwhile, the HOA caught wind. Suddenly, I was getting calls from blocked numbers, strange cars slowing down in front of my ranch, and one morning, I woke up to find their community newsletter stuffed in my mailbox. It had a full section warning residents about external agricultural threats and the potential presence of animals near shared use areas. They didn't name me directly, but everyone knew exactly who they meant. Tensions rose fast. I heard whispers that they were trying to hire a lawyer to challenge the rezoning. One board member even showed up on my property line, trying to chat about finding a compromise. I told him respectfully that all negotiations should go through the county now. The funny thing was, they still hadn't withdrawn the fence. Fine. Not even after everything. About a week before the zoning board was set to meet, I got a certified letter in the mail. Not from the HOA this time, but from a private law firm. They were claiming that the portion of green space I'd filed to rezone had been under HOA stewardship for public benefit, and that my application posed a public nuisance. They even threw around words like environmental impact and neighborhood destabilization. It was clearly a scare tactic, but still, it meant they were bringing in legal firepower. Then came the real twist. One of the county zoning board members was a former HOA board president. I found out through a friend at the county clerk's office, and my stomach dropped. Suddenly, it felt like the deck wasn't just stacked, it was loaded against me. That green space wasn't just a field anymore. It had become a symbol of who held the power: independent landowners like me, or overreaching HOAs trying to squeeze every inch of control they could. Meanwhile, a few of the more vocal HOA residents started organizing a petition to block the rezoning, rallying neighbors with emotional pleas about preserving peace and keeping livestock where it belongs. Ironically, none of them had a problem when their dogs barked at all hours, or when their landscapers blew dirt clouds right into my pasture. Now, the tension wasn't just legal, it was personal. The county hearing was only days away, and I had no idea how deep their connections ran. But I wasn't backing down. The day of the zoning hearing finally arrived. I showed up early, documents in hand, zoning maps, photos, and a list of neighboring ranchers who supported the change. The room was packed. HOA members sat shoulder to shoulder in the front rows, whispering and glaring as I walked past. Their lawyer wore a sharp suit and carried a binder so thick it looked like he was ready to argue a Supreme Court case. I just had my paperwork, a quiet confidence, and years of dealing with folks who thought they could bully their way into anything. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly explained the zoning issue, the history of the land, and how the HOA had been enforcing rules beyond their legal limits. I laid out every fact, backed by county maps and tax records. For a few seconds after I finished, the room was completely still. Then the questions started, most from the board, one or two from the crowd. But none of them could refute the facts. Then came the twist no one expected. One of the newer board members spoke up and revealed that the HOA's legal team had quietly tried to buy the disputed land earlier that year, under a shell company name. That backfired hard. Suddenly, everything shifted. The narrative turned from livestock zoning to potential misuse of HOA funds and shady land grabs. The board voted 4-1 in my favor. I'd won. But the real kicker? The county launched an investigation into the HOA's past dealings, and I didn't even have to file the complaint. After the county ruled in my favor and news of the HOA's attempted land grab got out, things in the neighborhood shifted real quick. That smug confidence they used to walk around with vanished almost overnight. A few board members quietly resigned, including the one who tried to confront me at my fence weeks earlier. Their fancy newsletters stopped showing up, and that aggressive lawyer? Turns out, he wasn't even licensed to practice in our county, just hired for show. The land was officially rezoned as Livestock Overflow, though I never actually brought animals onto it. I didn't need to. Just knowing it was mine to use, and that they couldn't touch it, was enough. The fence they fined me over stayed exactly where it was, untouched, solid as ever. They never bothered me about it again. In fact, they never contacted me again. A few of the quieter neighbors came by over the next few weeks. Some apologized. Others just nodded and thanked me for standing up for myself. Said they'd been tired of the HOA too, but were too afraid to push back. That part stuck with me. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person saying no to stop people who think they're above the rules. So yeah, they fined me over a fence. But in the end, they paid a much.